Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Well, as hard as it is to believe, we're already halfway through 2024, and if you've been tuning into the channel for a while now, you probably know that can only mean one thing. It's time for another edition of Dumbest Criminals, our quarterly recurring series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals and crime stories that we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered them on Crimes of the Week. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comments section below, as well as keep an eye out for a similar one at the end of the week where we'll be covering stories exclusively from our Crimes of the Week International series. With that out of the way, let's get into it. A 37-year-old Indiana man has reportedly managed to avoid jail time this week after he pleaded guilty in connection with a bizarre incident last summer in which he led police on a high-speed chase while working as a Google Street View driver. The whole thing started at around 5 p.m. on July 31st, 2023, when an officer with Henry County's Middletown Police Department spotted a rather unique vehicle driving recklessly near a local high school. The car was equipped with several 360-degree cameras that were mounted on an antenna, had California license plates, and was wrapped in a vinyl skin. The skin revealed why the car looked so strange. This was a vehicle that was supposed to be mapping for Google Street View. The officer attempted to conduct a traffic stop. However, the driver, later identified as 37-year-old Coleman Ferguson, refused to pull over. Instead, he sped up, eventually reaching speeds of 120 miles per hour. The Middletown officer alerted police in neighboring Madison County, who quickly joined in on the pursuit. It eventually came to an end when Coleman lost control of the Street View car, barreling through a guardrail and briefly going airborne before landing in a creek. He was arrested immediately after. During court proceedings at the end of last month, Coleman admitted that he had no reason to try and flee from police, other than the fact that he said he was scared. He pleaded guilty to a felony charge of fleeing from law enforcement, and as part of a plea deal is due to be given a 1-year suspended jail sentence. He has also agreed to pay a little over $3,200 in restitution. Despite Coleman's guilty plea, authorities say that they are confused as to how he ever became a Google contractor in the first place. The 37-year-old reportedly has a rap sheet that includes multiple driving-related offenses, and according to people in the area, had been seen driving recklessly in the Google vehicle many times before last summer's incident. Authorities in Iowa say that an accused sex offender exposed himself in more ways than one this week after he recently committed lewd acts in front of a child at a Walmart, then accidentally identified himself by complaining that his photo was being circulated by police. According to reports, the situation began about 4 months ago when the suspect, 44-year-old Dustin Hills, allegedly exposed himself to an 11-year-old girl at a Walmart supercenter in Iowa City. Hills reportedly followed the girl into a toy aisle, then exposed his genitals to her and began masturbating in front of her. After the disgusting incident was reported to police, Iowa City PD obtained the store's surveillance footage, quickly finding Hills. Of course, at this point they still didn't know who he was, so they began circulating his photo, including through their Facebook page. This apparently upset Hills, who at some point recently called the department to request that his photo be taken down. What he apparently didn't realize was that he had identified himself in the process. Hills was arrested this week and is now facing a charge of indecent exposure. According to reports, the 44-year-old has previous convictions for this same offense, as well as for other crimes including narcotics possession, probation violation, and possession of drug paraphernalia. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody on a $5,000 bond.
An Oklahoma woman reportedly made a true April Fool of herself last week when she was caught red-handed behind the wheel of a stolen vehicle, then gave police a hilariously ridiculous excuse to try and explain the situation. The whole thing started just before 4 p.m. on April 1st when Tulsa police received an alert about a stolen white SUV being driven in the area. They managed to track the vehicle, conducting a traffic stop a short time later. When officers spoke with the driver, later identified as 53-year-old Angela Harrison, she claimed that she had no idea the SUV was stolen. She said that about an hour earlier, she had been at a gas station when she ran into a customer at the Waffle House where she used to work. The customer remembered that her birthday was coming up and wanted to give her a present as a final tip. That present was $10 cash. Oh yeah, and the keys to a white Jeep Liberty. Understandably, police did not buy this ridiculous story, especially since the SUV in question had been reported stolen before Christmas. Authorities had surveillance footage of Harrison driving the vehicle from January 14th, meaning that she couldn't possibly have gotten it just an hour earlier. When confronted with this evidence, Harrison admitted that it was her in the surveillance footage, but still bizarrely tried to claim that she was telling the truth. She was later charged with possession of a stolen vehicle.
Authorities in Suffolk County, New York say that a 56-year-old Florida man is facing a number of charges this week after he led officers on a lengthy and dangerous high-speed chase, one that ended with a rather dramatic act of desperation. According to reports, the whole thing began just before 11 a.m. on April 8th, when police in the Long Island community of Southold were called to the local town hall annex. A woman who worked there explained that her ex-husband, who she identified as 56-year-old Roger Foster, had slashed a tire on her vehicle. Though Foster lived in Florida, he had apparently driven to the area that morning in a rental car for the express purpose of harassing his ex, who also had a no-contact order against him. The woman was able to provide authorities with the license plate information of the car Foster was traveling in, which police spotted about 40 minutes later. By this point, he was driving west on Route 48. While Foster briefly stopped when officers attempted to pull him over, he apparently had no intentions of coming quietly and quickly took off once again. He spent the next 45 minutes driving all over the area while attempting to elude police cruisers who were assisted by a helicopter overhead. The situation came to a dramatic end when Foster started heading through the town of Greenport, specifically down Sound Road. Because this road is a dead end, authorities initially thought that the 56-year-old was trapped. However, when he started speeding up, they realized that he had other plans. Seconds later, Foster flew through the guardrail at the end of the road, launching himself and his rental vehicle off of a bluff at approximately 100 miles an hour. He crashed into the beach below before the car bounced into the water. Now, some of the sources we came across claim that the drop from the bluff onto 67 Steps Beach is 100 feet. However, after looking on Google Maps, there's no way that this is the case. Don't get me wrong, the whole thing was still stupid and reckless, but the drop is maybe a third of that height at best, judging from pictures. Anyway, despite trying to carry out a low-budget Thelma and Louise, Foster was apparently not that badly injured. He was pulled from the water immediately after the crash and arrested, and is now facing numerous charges, including second-degree criminal contempt, third-degree criminal mischief, and unlawful fleeing, as well as a whole mess of traffic violations. That's all in addition to 2 outstanding warrants that had already been issued for his arrest related to violating the order of protection against his ex-wife.
A 35-year-old Florida man apparently went full-blown Oscar the Grouch last week after he was found by police drunk and naked inside of a trash can and was extremely uncooperative during his arrest. According to reports, the whole thing started sometime late on the night of April 6th when police were called about 35-year-old Wiley James Weeks. Weeks had allegedly taken over a corner trash can somewhere in downtown St. Petersburg and was not letting people use the garbage receptacle for its intended purpose. When officers arrived and tried to speak with Weeks, they quickly discovered that he reeked of alcohol and was missing most of his clothing. He also refused to identify himself or provide police with any further information. Despite this, the 35-year-old appeared to believe he was perfectly within his rights. According to the police report about the incident, Weeks said he, quote, was allowed to be drunk and disorderly and sit naked in a trash can on the public sidewalk. Unfortunately for Weeks, he was mistaken, and he was quickly arrested for disorderly intoxication and resisting an officer without violence. He ended up pleading guilty to both counts and was handed a $520 fine. Apparently, this is not the first time Weeks has been involved in similar incidents. He was previously arrested for another nude, drunken situation in Tampa after he and a friend apparently thought it would be fun to strip off their clothes after exiting a bar. He was busted again for criminal mischief again days later. Texas man was reportedly foiled by a bit of well-deserved instant karma this week when he was allegedly caught impersonating a police officer after unwittingly attempting to pull over a pair of real deputies. The whole thing began sometime on April 13th when a pair of Harris County deputies were undercover while working a racing event in Houston's Memorial area. The deputies were driving around when suddenly they saw a white Hyundai Santa Fe behind them. The vehicle was equipped with red and blue flashing lights and was clearly trying to pull them over. Of course, being that they were real deputies, the undercover officers immediately realized that something was off. The Santa Fe did not appear to be a legitimate Harris County police vehicle. They immediately notified the sheriff's office, who sent marked units to investigate. As soon as the marked units showed up, the driver of the Santa Fe, later identified as Sean Arnold, allegedly attempted to flee the scene. He was quickly stopped, at which point things got even more interesting. Not only was Arnold dressed in a uniform shirt, he was wearing a bulletproof vest, a body-worn camera, and had a security badge. He was also carrying a BB gun, taser, police radios, and other equipment which were clearly supposed to make him look like a real officer. He was placed under arrest and charged with impersonating a police officer and being a felon in possession of body armor. According to reports, this is far from Arnold's first similar offense. He has multiple arrests for impersonating officers in Texas, Illinois, and Missouri, and also has convictions for several offenses including theft of motor vehicles. Because of the circumstances, Harris County authorities say that it's likely there are other people that Arnold may have victimized or attempted to victimize while pretending to be an officer. They are now urging anyone who might have had such interactions with him to please come forward. An affidavit was released to the public that looks pretty embarrassing for one Indiana woman this week. One that reveals that she was recently charged after she tried to report her drug dealer to police because of a suspicious batch of meth she bought. According to the probable cause affidavit, the whole thing started sometime on January 10, 2024, when dispatchers with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office received 2 911 calls in relatively quick succession. Both calls came from the same address in the city of Bedford. However, no one answered when 911 operators attempted to speak with the caller. In order to make sure everything was okay, police were sent to the home in question, where they eventually met with one of the residents there, 34-year-old Sarah Harris. She not only admitted to making the calls, she soon revealed the bizarre reason why. The 34-year-old said she bought a bad batch of meth and she wanted to turn in her dealer. Harris went on to explain that the previous day, she went to an acquaintance's house where she smoked what she described as a normal bowl of methamphetamine. However, after purchasing more and taking it home, she snorted some of it only to find it made her feel weird. The 34-year-old stated that she, quote, noticed something different when it touched her skin and nostrils. She said she felt she needed to stand up or she was going to have a heart attack. This had lasted for several hours. Harris was angry because she felt like the meth she bought wasn't what it was supposed to be, and she now said she wanted to press charges against her dealer. When asked if she still had any of the drugs left, Harris apparently turned over a small baggie of the crystalline substance. Police tested it, and afterwards had some good and bad news for the 34-year-old. The good news was that the bag Harris bought really did contain methamphetamine. The bad news was that the bag that Harris bought really did contain methamphetamine, meaning that she had now confessed to purchasing and using illegal drugs. Harris was arrested and has since been charged with possession. Apparently, she has a list of previous convictions which include more possession offenses, as well as theft, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, resisting, and operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated.
Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a 32-year-old man is facing charges this week after he allegedly broke into a house and stole one of the residents' pets, later offering a strange excuse for his actions. According to reports, the whole thing began just before 4:20 in the morning on April 15th, when homeowner Ty Pham awoke to an incredibly alarming situation. A stranger had broken in through the back door of his house and was in the middle of stealing one of his 2 dogs. Ty shouted at the man and asked what the hell he was doing, to which the suspect replied that it was his dog. He then fled the scene, taking the animal with him. Officers quickly caught up with the suspect, later identified as 32-year-old Janang Morena, as he was walking close to the crime scene about 15 minutes later. When they asked him about the burglary that had just happened, he gave an incredibly strange excuse. Morena claimed that his black pit bull had been stolen in South Daytona, so he had started walking around looking for it. He had done so until he came across Ty Pham's house, where he heard a dog barking inside. For some reason, he assumed that it was his dog, so he broke in. Of course, this didn't make sense for a lot of reasons, but perhaps the most glaring one was that Tai Pham didn't own a black pit bull. He owned 2 Labradors, a black one and a yellow one. Making the situation even more ridiculous, Morena allegedly stole the yellow one. The 32-year-old was arrested and charged with burglary of an occupied dwelling, as well as providing a false name to law enforcement. At the time he was taken into custody, Morena allegedly had a warrant out for reckless driving.
A 33-year-old Florida man apparently had police shaking their heads this week after he was identified as a suspect in a theft case and he tried to avoid detection by putting on a rather obvious disguise. According to reports, the whole thing took place just after 3 p.m. on April 24th when officers from the Glades County Sheriff's Office were investigating a stolen boat. After successfully locating the boat in the old Calusa Lodge area of Lakeport, they had come up with a suspect in the case, a 33-year-old man named Joshua Kalatka. They were in the middle of searching for Kalatka when they spotted something, or rather someone, who caught their attention. As officers were looking around the area, a person exited a nearby residence and started walking away. It turned out to be Kalatka, who was clearly trying to disguise himself as a woman. He was wearing a blonde wig, a blue feather-patterned dress, a white cardigan, and perhaps most conspicuously of all, a pair of large sunglasses. Understandably, the getup did not fool officers, who quickly placed Kalatka under arrest. The 33-year-old is now facing multiple theft charges for the stolen boat, as well as a John Deere Gator utility vehicle. Police say that Kalatka already had warrants out at the time he was taken into custody, and that more possibly stolen items were found at the scene. Glades County authorities say that they are now working with their counterparts in Seminole County, and that more charges may follow.
A Florida vacation reportedly came to an abrupt end for 2 Missouri women last week when they got into a fist fight inside of a home and had to be separated by police. A fight that was apparently triggered by a disagreement over Disney World tickets. The whole thing started at around 11:20 a.m. on May 6th when police in the city of Wildwood were called to an address on the 5900 block of Roundel Way. They arrived to find 2 women, later identified as 31-year-old Catherine Northrup and 28-year-old Gina Danforth, who were in the middle of a violent altercation. The women were apparently going at it so hard that officers had to physically separate them, even after which Northrup continued to be belligerent. Danforth was hardly blameless herself, though. She quickly admitted to hitting the 31-year-old, who had scratches on her neck, elbow, and stomach. Apparently, there were several people present who witnessed the fight. However, according to police, none of them were reliable. Instead, after getting everyone's statements, they had to kind of piece together their own theory as to what had happened. The exact circumstances of the altercation still aren't clear, though it appears that the problems between Northrup and Danforth began with an argument over tickets to Disney World and a golf cart. Northrup further claimed that Danforth got in her face and started spitting, and that she had initially tried to remove herself from the situation, but was grabbed by her hair and pinned down. Both women were subsequently taken to a local hospital, Northrup so that she could be treated for injuries, and Danforth because she said she wasn't feeling well. Afterwards, they were both arrested and charged with battery, and have since been released after posting a $1,000 bond. In case you're wondering, it's unclear if either woman got to go to Disney. Authorities in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, say that a local man is facing charges in connection with an equally bizarre and revolting crime this week after he allegedly splattered his brother with the contents of his adult diaper during the middle of an argument. The situation began just before 2 a.m. on May 14th, when St. Petersburg police were called to a residence on the 5500 block of 22nd Avenue North with reports of a domestic incident. They arrived to find a strange and stomach-churning scene. On the porch of the home were the remnants of a soiled adult diaper. The contents of that diaper appeared to be strewn about and were partially on the shirt of one of the residents there. The man with the dirty t-shirt explained that a short time earlier he had gotten into an argument with his 18-year-old brother, Damian Caston. It's unclear exactly what this argument was about, but it quickly escalated. Though Kasten is reportedly paralyzed from the waist down, that didn't stop him from wreaking havoc. Using his arms to move around, the 18-year-old allegedly began damaging walls inside the house, after which he started throwing things at his brother and another person who was there. Deciding that things were spiraling out of control, the brother and the other witness had picked Kasten up at some point and had carried him outside to prevent him from doing further damage. That's when the 18-year-old apparently resorted to hurling the only thing he had left. You might say that he was Kasten diapers. Anyway, the soiled diaper apparently hit the brother in the chest, leading to the gross situation that police observed when they arrived. Kasten was arrested at the scene and has now been charged with domestic battery. He was also ordered to have no contact with his brother.
Authorities in Marion County, Florida say that an accused car thief made quite the interesting decision recently after he allegedly stole a vehicle belonging to a local woman, then called her to tell her what he had done. According to reports, the crime took place sometime recently when Marion County police received a call from a woman in the city of Ocala. The woman explained that she had just had her car stolen, but that weirdly afterwards the suspected perpetrator, 32-year-old Marquise Nance, had phoned her to tell her about the crime. Specifically, he said that he had left the vehicle at a Winn-Dixie supermarket at the local Marion Oaks shopping center. When officers responded to the scene, they found the woman's stolen car along with Nance. Apparently, he was in a less honest mood at this point because when questioned about the situation, he claimed that he hadn't stolen anything. Luckily, police were able to recover surveillance video from the area that showed him driving and exiting the vehicle. Nance was arrested and is now facing multiple charges, including grand theft of a motor vehicle. In a recent video posted by the Marion County Sheriff's Office, one of their officers, Lieutenant Paul Bloom, joked that it was kind of Nance that he told the victim he'd stolen her car.
Authorities in Lyon County, Iowa say that a man was recently busted in connection with a bizarre DUI case, one in which he apparently attempted to use a fake ID containing a rather ridiculous oversight. The whole thing began sometime on May 12th when an officer in the city of Rock Rapids spotted a 2016 Ford Fusion that was driving erratically. The vehicle was all over the road and posed a danger to other motorists, so eventually police pulled the car over. When an officer approached the vehicle, they came face to face with the driver, later identified as 33-year-old Joe Vaida. Vaida was wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy and rainy outside, and his breath reportedly smelled of alcohol. It wasn't hard to pinpoint why. There was an open can of beer in the center console of the vehicle, and more alcohol in the back seat. Unsurprisingly, the 33-year-old failed a breathalyzer test and was also found to be in possession of methamphetamine. At this point, Vaida was well and truly busted, but in an apparent last-ditch effort not to be identified, he handed the officer who pulled him over a fake Minnesota state ID card. Unfortunately, the card was about as convincing as Vaida's driving. What gave it away, you ask? Well, for starters, it listed him as being 8 feet tall. Vaida is apparently 5 foot 8 inches. The 33-year-old was arrested and is now facing several charges, including narcotics possession, operating a vehicle while intoxicated, and providing cops with a false ID. At the time of his arrest, he was also apparently wanted in another Iowa county for failure to appear in court on an earlier DUI charge. It's unclear if he pretended to be 8 feet tall in that case as well. Representatives from the Florida Highway Patrol released wild footage of a recent car chase last week after a 27-year-old woman allegedly stole a vehicle during a test drive and then tried to flee from authorities. According to reports, the whole thing began sometime on May 9th when 27-year-old Melina Logan showed up at the Honda dealership located on South Miami's South Dixie Highway. After asking to test drive a new 2024 Honda Civic, Logan was allowed to briefly go out in the vehicle. However, things took a serious turn when she got back. As soon as the salesperson who was accompanying her stepped out of the car, she drove off. The stolen vehicle was reported to Miami-Dade police, who in turn notified additional members of law enforcement. Before long, Logan was spotted again, this time by a Florida Highway Patrol trooper as she was near the intersection of State Road 826 and Northwest 74th Street. The trooper attempted to conduct a traffic stop, but Logan refused to pull over, instead continuing to pick up speed on the busy highway. She proceeded to weave dangerously in and out of traffic at speeds of up to 90 miles per hour, eventually pulling onto the paved shoulder of the road when traffic became too heavy. As Logan raced down the narrow shoulder, she allegedly struck several victims before finally immobilizing the vehicle on a concrete barrier. Even at this point, though, she refused to give up, jumping off the exit ramp she was on into a canal below. In dashcam footage recorded by the pursuing trooper, several officers can be seen trying to rescue Logan from the water. The 27-year-old reportedly refused to grab safety ropes that were thrown to her, forcing police to ultimately go into the canal and pull her out. Logan was arrested at the scene and is now facing several charges, including grand theft, aggravated fleeing and eluding, resisting an officer without violence, and leaving the scene of a crash involving an injury. A 33-year-old Florida man may not win any awards for his comedic originality. However, he did manage to land himself on the receiving end of some pretty hilarious instant karma this week, when he jokingly told officers that his name was Mr. Monopoly during the middle of an investigation, and he ended up going straight to jail. The whole thing started sometime on the evening of June 1st, when police in the city of St. Petersburg received a call about some possible vandalism in progress. Callers said that they had seen a man spray painting a building at the intersection of 54th Avenue and 41st Street South. After responding to the scene, officers managed to find a man in the area matching the description that witnesses had provided. He reportedly had a bag slung over his shoulder, inside of which there were a number of cans of spray paint in plain sight. Police asked the man to identify himself. However, he refused to answer. That was until he was placed under arrest. After being put in the back of a patrol car, the suspect said that his name was Mr. Monopoly and claimed his date of birth was 4/20/69. What a brilliant comedic mind, am I right? Anyway, the joke was on him because almost immediately after this, police found his driver's license. It identified him as 33-year-old Ryan Howard. Not only was Howard taken straight to jail without passing go or collecting $200, he is now facing charges of criminal mischief and resisting for providing a fake name. Unfortunately for Mr. Monopoly, he also won't be able to secure his release by rolling doubles or paying $50 in Parker Brothers money. His bond was set at 1,000 real American dollars. Representatives from New Mexico's Albuquerque Police Department say that a 46-year-old wannabe arsonist recently got hit with quite the amusing bit of instant karma when he allegedly tried to burn down his ex-girlfriend's house, only to end up setting himself on fire instead. The bizarre and terrifying incident took place shortly before midnight on May 24th, when Albuquerque police were called about a potential arson case. They were alerted by a female victim who stated that her boyfriend, 46-year-old Artemio Sanchez Ortega, had just come to her home and tried to set the place on fire. When police and firefighters arrived at the scene, they were quickly able to extinguish the blaze. Though it had done damage to vehicles in the woman's gated front yard, thankfully the fire hadn't reached her house, especially because she and her children had been inside at the time. While the woman was able to show officers several phone calls from earlier that night made by the suspect, who she said had clearly been drinking, even more conclusive evidence soon emerged. It was video footage shot by her neighbor's surveillance camera across the street that captured the bumbling crime as it unfolded. In the footage, a man, alleged to be Ortega, can be seen walking down the street nonchalantly with a red gas can. However, the man's calm demeanor quickly gives way to panic after he hops over the front gate of the victim's home and isn't careful with where he's splashing the accelerant. As soon as he attempts to light it, the entire front yard goes up in flames, along with the man's own clothing. As the camera footage refocuses from the sudden blast, the suspect can be seen clinging to the fence once again. After tripping over his own feet, he runs down the street away from the scene while still on fire. Just top-tier comedy, folks. Unfortunately, at the time of this recording, police still haven't been able to find Ortega. He is now wanted on arson charges and is believed to be driving a white Chevy Silverado with Texas license plate 1CO2721. Anyone with information is asked to reach out to the Albuquerque police. Authorities in Johnson County, Iowa say that a local woman is facing 2 misdemeanor charges this week after she allegedly called 911 and made a false report about a stalking and domestic violence situation because she wanted to back out of an online date. The whole thing apparently started just after midnight on June 16th when police received a 911 call from 18-year-old Sumaya Thomas. Thomas reportedly told an operator that her abusive ex-boyfriend had shown up outside her house and that he was sending her threats over Snapchat that he was going to hit, punch, kick, and stab her. She said that she had known this man for years and that she was pregnant with his baby. When officers arrived at Thomas's residence, which is located in a suburb of Iowa City, they spotted a man leaving the scene. Since he seemed to match the description in the report they had received, police detained the man and began to question him about what he was doing. It wasn't long before things took quite a bizarre turn. The man explained that not only was he not some abusive and threatening ex-boyfriend, he had only met Thomas about a week ago. They had encountered each other on a dating app and had made plans to meet up that night. Sure enough, the man was able to provide messages documenting and backing up his story. When police turned their attention back to Thomas, she eventually admitted that she had lied about everything. She claimed that she was supposed to go on a date with the man who officers had spoken to, but at the last minute she got cold feet and decided she didn't want to. Instead of just telling the guy this herself, Thomas apparently called 911. She even reportedly went as far as to say that she, quote, didn't think officers would help, so she made up this call and the events that she described, telling police it was, quote, because she didn't want the mail here and felt we wouldn't be able to do anything if she just called normally. Thomas was arrested for placing a false 911 call and making a fake report of an indictable offense, both of which are misdemeanors. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.